In the dusty streets of 1887 Arizona Territory, shy Martha Caldwell noticed the dangerous symptoms that everyone else missed. Symptoms that could kill the most powerful rancher in 3 territories if she didn't find the courage to speak up. But when a life hangs in the balance, can the quietest voice in town convince a man accustomed to command that his empire means nothing if he's not alive to run it? Martha's broom scraped against the wooden steps as another cloud of dust swirled down Main Street. The morning heat in Copper Creek already made her cotton dress stick to her back. Even though the sun had barely climbed above the mountains, she hated how the dust got into everything. Her hair, her shoes, even the medicine bottles inside Doc Henderson's clinic. The thundering of hooves made her look up. A fancy stagecoach was racing toward town, its wheels kicking up dirt like a small tornado. Martha stepped back against the clinic door as the coach rumbled past, pulled by 4 sweating horses. Through the window, she caught a glimpse of a man in expensive clothes, dark hair under a black hat, strong jaw, eyes that looked like they owned everything they saw. Must be someone important, she whispered to herself, the way she always talked when no one else was around. Speaking out loud to other people felt like trying to push through thick mud. The stagecoach stopped in front of the bank, and Martha pretended to sweep while she watched. The man who stepped out moved like a king visiting his kingdom. His leather boots were polished to a shine. His silver belt buckle caught the sunlight, and when he adjusted his black hat, even that simple movement looked powerful. But Martha noticed something else, something that made her frown. The man's left hand shook just a tiny bit when he reached for his travel bag. It was so quick that if she had blinked, she would have missed it. Then he pressed his other hand against his chest, like he was trying to catch his breath. "Wonder who that fancy fellow is," said Mrs. Chen, walking up with her basket of vegetables for the general store. Her round face was curious as she watched the stranger. "Don't know," Martha replied quietly. She wanted to mention the trembling hand and the way he seemed to struggle for air, but the words stuck in her throat like always. Who would listen to her anyway? The stranger straightened his shoulders and walked toward the bank like nothing had happened. But Martha had spent 3 years helping Doc Henderson, and she had learned to see things others missed. Sick people often tried to hide their pain, especially men, especially rich men, who thought showing weakness was worse than dying. "Martha," Doc Henderson's voice called from inside the clinic. "Come help me with these supply boxes." She hurried inside, leaving her broom by the door. Doc Henderson was a small, thin man with white hair and kind eyes behind wire glasses. His hands were gentle when he treated patients, but they shook more each year. Martha worried about him, though she never said so. "We got a shipment of laudanum from Phoenix," he said, lifting a heavy wooden box. "And some new bandages." Mrs. Patterson ordered extra. "Seems her husband hurt his back again trying to move those cattle." Martha nodded and began organizing the bottles on the shelves. Each one had to be in the right place, with the labels facing forward. The bottle order made everything safer. Wrong medicine could kill someone. Through the window, she could see the fancy stranger talking to Mayor Collins outside the bank. Even from far away, she noticed how the stranger kept shifting his weight from one foot to the other, like standing still was hard work. His left hand trembled again when he pointed down the street. "Doc," she said slowly, "what makes a person's hand shake like that?" Doc Henderson looked up from his inventory sheet. "Lots of things. Could be nerves, could be too much coffee, could be something serious, like heart trouble. Why do you ask?" Martha felt heat creep up her neck. "Just wondering," but she kept watching through the window. The stranger was shaking hands with Mayor Collins now, and she saw him wince slightly, like the simple act caused pain. When he walked away from the bank, his steps looked careful, measured, not like someone who was tired from travel, but like someone who was fighting to stay upright. "I'm going to deliver medicine to the Morrison Ranch," Doc Henderson said, picking up his black leather bag. "Their youngest boy has been fighting a fever for 3 days. Can you watch the clinic?" "Of course," Martha said. She always watched the clinic when Doc was away, It was one of the few times she felt truly useful. After Doc left, Martha went back to organizing supplies. But her mind kept returning to the stranger and those small signs of distress. In her 3 years of helping Doc Henderson, she had learned that the body told stories through tiny details. A pale face could mean blood loss. Blue lips meant trouble breathing. Trembling hands often meant the heart was struggling. The clinic bell chimed, making her jump. She looked up to see the stranger himself standing in the doorway, his tall frame filling the space. Up close, she could see fine lines around his dark eyes and a thin layer of sweat on his forehead, despite the morning cool. "Afternoon, miss," he said in a deep voice that sounded like it was used to giving orders. "Is the doctor available?" Martha's throat felt dry. "No, sir. He's out on a call. Won't be back until evening." The stranger's jaw tightened, and she caught another glimpse of that hand tremor. He looked disappointed, maybe even worried, though he tried to hide it. "I see. Well, perhaps you could tell him that Ezra Blackwood stopped by. I'll return tomorrow morning." Ezra Blackwood. Even Martha had heard that name whispered in the general store. The richest cattle rancher in 3 territories, they said. Owned more land than some entire town, but right now, he looked like a man carrying a heavy secret. As he turned to leave, Martha saw him pause and press his hand against his chest again. This time, his breathing looked shallow and quick, like he had just run a long distance. The words came out before she could stop them. "Mr. Blackwood, are you feeling well?" Ezra Blackwood stopped in the doorway like he had walked into an invisible wall. He turned around slowly, his dark eyes studying Martha's face with surprise. Most people looked at him and saw money, power, success. This quiet young woman seemed to see something completely different. "I'm perfectly fine," he said. But even as the words left his mouth, another wave of tightness gripped his chest. He tried to hide it, but Martha was watching him with those sharp green eyes. Martha stepped out from behind the counter, her heart pounding. Every instinct told her to stay quiet, to let this important man leave without bothering him. But something stronger pushed her forward. The same feeling she got when she saw a patient in danger. "Forgive me for speaking out of turn, Mr. Blackwood," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I've been helping Doc Henderson for 3 years now. I've seen those signs before." "What signs?" Ezra asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. Martha wrung her hands nervously. "The way you keep touching your chest, how your left hand trembles when you think no one is looking, the shortness of breath, like you can't get enough air." Ezra's eyes narrowed. "Young lady, I don't know what you think you're seeing, but I assure you," his protest died as another sharp pain shot through his chest, stronger this time. He grabbed the edge of the counter, his knuckles turning white. His face went pale, and small drops of sweat appeared on his forehead. Martha moved quickly, pulling out the wooden chair where patients sat during examinations. "Please, sit down. When did this start?" Something about her calm confidence made Ezra sink into the chair instead of arguing. Maybe it was the way she moved with sure hands, despite being obviously nervous. Or maybe it was because he was tired of pretending everything was fine, when his body felt like it was betraying him. "About a week ago," he admitted reluctantly. "Thought it was just the heat and dust from traveling. But it's been getting worse each day." Martha nodded, already reaching for Doc Henderson's stethoscope. She had used it many times to check on patients when the doctor was busy. "May I listen to your heart? I know it's not proper for a young lady, but..." At this point, propriety seems less important than breathing properly, Ezra said with a weak smile. He shrugged out of his expensive black jacket. Martha's hands were steady as she placed the stethoscope on his chest. What she heard made her stomach drop. His heartbeat jumped and skipped like a rabbit running from a wolf. She had heard this exact sound before in old Mr. Jameson, just 2 weeks before his heart stopped completely. "Mr. Blackwood," she said carefully, "your heart rhythm is very irregular. This could be dangerous if you don't rest." "Rest?" Ezra laughed, but it sounded forced. "I have the biggest land deal of my career happening today. Investors are coming from 3 territories. There are contracts to sign. money to move, decisions that affect hundreds of people. Outside, Martha could hear the sound of many horses approaching. Through the window, she saw 5 well-dressed men on expensive horses, all looking around for someone. They wore suits despite the heat, and their faces showed the kind of impatience that came with money and power. "Ezra," one of them called out, "where are you? The Morrison meeting starts in 1 hour." Martha saw the conflict cross Ezra's face. He started to stand up, already reaching for his jacket like a soldier putting on armor for battle. "Mr. Blackwood, please," Martha said, her voice urgent, but still soft. "If you push yourself through business meetings and travel in this condition, you're asking me to cancel the most important deal of my life, based on the word of." He paused, looking at her young face and simple dress. "Based on someone I just met." Martha felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. "I know how this looks. I know what I am. Just the doctor's helper. Someone most people don't even notice. But I also know what I heard through that stethoscope." The voices outside were getting louder and more impatient. "Ezra, the bank president is waiting. Morrison won't stay in town past tonight." "They need me," Ezra said, standing up despite Martha's worried look. "The Blackwood Empire doesn't run itself. There are investors who traveled hundreds of miles, employees who depend on these deals, contracts that have taken months to arrange." Martha watched as the weight of responsibility fought against his body's desperate need for rest. She thought of all the times she had wanted to speak up, to share what she had observed, only to be ignored or dismissed. But this felt different. This time, someone's life hung in the balance. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, finding strength she didn't know she had. "What good is an empire if you're not alive to run it?" The truth of her words hung in the air between them, like smoke from a fire. Outside, the businessmen were getting off their horses, their expensive boots heavy on the wooden sidewalk as they walked toward the clinic. Ezra looked at Martha. Two really looked at her for the first time. In her quiet face, he saw something he rarely encountered. Someone who cared more about his life than his money. Someone brave enough to tell him a truth he didn't want to hear. The clinic door burst open before either of them could say another word. The morning heat shimmered off the dusty street as Martha watched Ezra Blackwood's face change from confident to confused. His dark eyes searched hers, looking for answers she wasn't sure she had the right to give. "What exactly are you seeing, miss?" He paused, waiting for her name. "Caldwell. Martha Caldwell." Her voice came out stronger than she expected. "And I'm seeing the same thing that happened to Mr. Jameson 3 months ago." Ezra's eyebrows shot up. "Jameson? I don't know any. He died." The words hung in the air between them like smoke from a gunshot. Martha's hands trembled as she set down the medicine bottle she'd been holding. "Heart gave out right here in this chair. Started the same way yours is starting." Outside, horses nickered and wagon wheels creaked as the town came alive with morning business. But inside the clinic, time seemed frozen. Ezra stared at Martha as if seeing her for the first time. "You think I'm going to die?" His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Martha's heart pounded so hard, she was sure he could hear it. She'd never spoken this boldly to anyone, especially not to someone as important as Ezra Blackwood. But the memory of Mr. Jameson's final moments pushed her forward. "I think you're in danger," she said carefully. "Your heart isn't beating right. It's skipping and jumping, like a spooked horse." Ezra looked down at his chest, then back at her. "How can you possibly know that just by looking at me?" "It's not just looking." Martha moved closer, her shyness battling with something stronger, the need to help. "It's the way you breathe when you think nobody's watching. The way your hand shakes when you're not thinking about it. The way you pressed your palm against your chest when you got off that stagecoach. You were watching me that closely?" There was something new in his voice. Now, not anger, but curiosity. Martha's cheeks burned red. "I watch everyone. It's what I do when I'm too scared to talk to them." A smile tugged at the corner of Ezra's mouth. "And what made you brave enough to talk to me?" "Because talking to you might keep you alive." The words came out in a rush, and not talking to Mr. Jameson didn't. The clinic door opened with a sharp jingle, and Mayor Collins stepped inside. His round face was flushed with excitement. "Mr. Blackwood, there you are. The whole town's buzzing about your visit." His eyes barely glanced at Martha before focusing entirely on Ezra. "We need to discuss the Morrison property. It's the chance of a lifetime." Martha watched Ezra's posture change instantly. His shoulders straightened, his face became a mask of confidence. But she could still see what the mayor couldn't, the slight tremor in his left hand, the way his breathing had grown shallow again. "Of course, Mayor Collins. Business is why I'm here." Ezra started to stand, then seemed to remember Martha's warning. He hesitated, caught between his public role and his private fear. "Actually," Martha said, surprising herself again, "Mr. Blackwood was just asking about our local doctors. He's been feeling poorly from the long journey." Mayor Collins waved his hand dismissively. "Nothing a good meal and a stiff drink won't cure. The hotel's preparing their finest room for you, Mr. Blackwood, and Morrison's already waiting to discuss terms." Martha saw the conflict playing across Ezra's face. The mayor was offering him everything he'd come for: business, respect, success. She was offering him something much less appealing: rest, caution, the possibility that he wasn't as strong as everyone believed. "Perhaps we could delay the meeting until this afternoon," Ezra said slowly. "Give me time to prepare properly." "Nonsense." Mayor Collins clapped him on the back, and Martha saw Ezra wince slightly. "Morrison's leaving on the evening stage. It's now or never, my friend." Martha felt helpless as she watched Ezra being pulled back into his world of deals and deadlines. She was just a clinic assistant, barely 20 years old. Who was she to tell the most powerful man in 3 territories how to live his life? But then Ezra looked at her over the mayor's shoulder. In his eyes, she saw something she'd never seen directed at her before: trust. He was asking her, silently, what she thought he should do. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, her voice stronger than it had ever been, "what good is the biggest deal in Arizona if you're not alive to enjoy the profits?" Mayor Collins spun around, noticing Martha properly for the first time. "Who is this girl? What business does she have?" "She has the business of someone who knows what she's talking about," Ezra interrupted. His voice carried a new authority, but Martha could hear the uncertainty underneath. "Miss Caldwell has medical training." It wasn't exactly true, but it wasn't exactly false either. Martha had learned more in 3 years with Doc Henderson than most people learned in a lifetime. "Medical training?" Mayor Collins looked Martha up and down like she was a strange animal. "She's barely old enough to tend chickens, let alone give medical advice to a man of your standing." Martha felt her old shyness creeping back, telling her to step away, to let the important men handle important things. But then she remembered Mr. Jameson's widow, crying at his funeral. She remembered all the signs she'd seen but hadn't been brave enough to mention until it was too late. "Age doesn't matter when someone's heart is failing," she said quietly. "And right now, Mr. Blackwood's heart needs rest more than it needs business meetings." The words fell into silence. Mayor Collins stared at Martha as if she'd spoken in a foreign language. Ezra stared at her too, but his expression was different, thoughtful, considering. "You really believe that?" he asked. Martha nodded, not trusting her voice. "And you believe I could? That what happened to Jameson could happen to me?" "I believe ignoring the warning signs is dangerous," she said carefully. "I believe your body is trying to tell you something important." Mayor Collins laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "This is ridiculous, Ezra. You're letting a backwoods girl fill your head with nonsense. Morrison won't wait forever." Ezra was quiet for a long moment, his hand unconsciously pressed against his chest again. Martha watched him struggle between what everyone expected of him and what his body was telling him he needed. "What would you do," he asked Martha, "if you were in my position?" It was the first time in her life that anyone had asked for her opinion on something that mattered. Martha felt the weight of the moment settling on her shoulders. "I'd listen to my heart," she said simply. "And right now, your heart is telling you to slow down." Thunder rumbled in the distance as storm clouds gathered over Copper Creek. Martha watched through the clinic window as 3 riders approached at a gallop, their horses lathered with sweat and foam. Even before they dismounted, she could tell by their expensive clothes and urgent movements that they were connected to Ezra Blackwood. "Trouble coming," she murmured, her hands automatically straightening the supplies on Doc Henderson's desk. Ezra looked up from where he'd been resting in the patient chair, his color better after 20 minutes of sitting still. "Those are my business partners. They must have gotten word that I missed the Morrison meeting." The clinic door burst open before Martha could reach it. 3 men in dark suits filled the doorway, their faces grim with purpose. The leader, a silver-haired man with cold blue eyes, stepped forward first. Benjamin Curtis. He introduced himself to Martha without warmth. "I'm here for Mr. Blackwood." "Ben?" Ezra said wearily. "I can explain." "Explain? There's nothing to explain." Curtis's voice cut through the air like a whip. "Morrison waited 2 hours. 2 hours, Ezra. Do you know what that cost us?" Martha positioned herself slightly between Curtis and Ezra, though she wasn't sure what protection she could offer. The second man, younger with nervous energy, paced near the door. "The whole territory's talking," he said rapidly. "Word is you're sick, that you can't handle the pressure anymore. Stock prices are already dropping." "That's enough, Davis," Ezra said sharply, but Martha could hear the strain in his voice. Curtis stepped closer, his attention finally focusing on Martha. "And who might you be, young lady? The one filling Mr. Blackwood's head with medical fairy tales?" "I'm Martha Caldwell," she replied, lifting her chin despite her racing heart. "I work with Dr. Henderson." "Work with?" Curtis laughed harshly. "You mean you sweep floors and organize bandages. What could you possibly know about diagnosing a man like Ezra Blackwood?" Martha felt her cheeks burn, but she held her ground. "I know what I heard when I listened to his heart. I know the signs of cardiac distress when I see them." The third man, older and quieter than the others, finally spoke. "With respect, miss, we've brought Mr. Blackwood to the finest doctors in San Francisco, Denver, even Chicago. None of them found anything wrong." "When?" Martha asked quickly. "When did you see these doctors?" Curtis waved impatiently. "What does it matter? Within the last year or 2. "Heart conditions can develop quickly," Martha interrupted, surprising herself with her boldness. What was true 6 months ago might not be true today. "Listen to me, girl." Curtis's voice dropped dangerously low. "You have no idea what you're interfering with. This isn't some frontier farmer with a bellyache. This is Ezra Blackwood. His decisions affect thousands of people, millions of dollars. And none of that matters if he collapses during your next big meeting." Martha shot back, her fear transforming into anger. Money can't buy back a stopped heart. Outside, the storm was moving closer. Lightning flickered in the distance, and the wind began rattling the clinic windows. The approaching weather seemed to match the tension building in the small room. "Ezra." Curtis turned his full attention to his business partner. "I've known you for 15 years. You're the strongest man I know. You don't let fear control your decisions." "This isn't about fear," Ezra said quietly. "It's about being smart." "Smart?" Davis laughed nervously. "What's smart about hiding in a clinic because some girl thinks she heard something wrong with your heart?" Martha watched Ezra's face carefully. She could see the doubt creeping in, the way Curtis's words were eating away at his confidence in her diagnosis. These men knew exactly how to manipulate him. They'd been doing it for years. "Mr. Blackwood," she said softly, "may I listen to your heart again? Right now? While everyone's here?" Curtis stepped forward aggressively. "Absolutely not. We're not going to stand here while you put on some medical theater." "Let her," Ezra said firmly. "If there's nothing wrong, it will only take a minute to prove it." Martha reached for the stethoscope with steady hands, though her heart was pounding. She was about to put her reputation, such as it was, on the line in front of 3 powerful men who clearly thought she was a fraud. As she placed the stethoscope against Ezra's chest, the room fell silent except for the growing storm outside. Martha listened carefully, her trained ear picking up the subtle irregularities in his heartbeat. But something was different now. The rhythm was even more erratic than before. The stress is making it worse, she said quietly, looking up at Ezra with concern. Your heart rate is all over the place. What exactly are you claiming to hear? The older man asked skeptically. Irregular rhythm, missed beats, rapid fluctuations in rate, Martha replied. It's like his heart can't decide what pace to keep. Curtis rolled his eyes dramatically. This is all very impressive, but we have real business to conduct. Ezra, the Morrison deal isn't the only opportunity we're losing. There are 3 other major contracts hanging in the balance while you're playing sick. I'm not playing, Ezra began, but his protest was cut short as another wave of chest pain visibly crossed his features. Martha was beside him instantly, her small hand on his shoulder. Breathe slowly, in and out. See? Curtis gestured toward them. Drama and theatrics. Ezra, you've ridden 100 miles in desert heat without complaint. You've closed deals under pressure that would break lesser men. Since when do you let a little chest tightness stop you? Martha could see the internal battle playing out on Ezra's face. Everything Curtis said was true. He was a strong man, a successful man, someone who'd built an empire through determination and willpower. But she could also see what the others refused to acknowledge, the way his hands trembled slightly, the pallor of his skin, the careful way he held himself as if any sudden movement might cause pain. What if she's wrong? Davis pressed. What if you're throwing away everything you've worked for based on the amateur diagnosis of a girl who's never been outside this dusty town? And what if she's right? Ezra asked quietly. The question hung in the air like the approaching storm. Outside, the first fat raindrops began spattering against the windows. Curtis's expression hardened. Then we'll deal with it later. But right now, we have business that can't wait. Business that might kill him, Martha said, her voice growing stronger despite her fear. You're asking him to choose between his life and his empire. What kind of choice is that? The kind successful men make every day, Curtis replied coldly. The kind that separates leaders from followers. Martha looked at the 3 men surrounding Ezra, all of them pulling him toward a decision that could cost him everything. She thought about all the times she'd stayed quiet, all the moments when she'd had something important to say but lacked the courage to say it. Not this time. Mr. Blackwood, she said, her voice carrying clearly over the sound of rain beginning to patter on the roof. These men see you as a business asset. I see you as a human being. Which opinion do you think you should trust more? The clinic door exploded inward like a gunshot. Martha jumped back as 3 men in fancy suits stomped inside, their heavy boots making the wooden floor shake. Their eyes found Ezra sitting in the chair, and their faces turned red with anger. There you are. The biggest man had silver hair and mean eyes. His voice boomed through the small room like thunder. We've been looking everywhere for you, Ezra. Martha stepped closer to Ezra without thinking. Something about these men scared her. They looked at her like she was a bug they wanted to step on. The Morrison meeting starts in 1 hour, the silver-haired man said. His name was Benjamin Curtis, and he owned banks in 3 different towns. Do you know how much money we'll lose if you miss this? Ben, I need to. Ezra started to speak, but Curtis cut him off. You need to get up right now and come with us. Morrison won't wait forever. Curtis looked around the clinic like it smelled bad. What are you doing in this place anyway? Martha felt her hands shake, but she made them stop. She had seen Curtis before, riding through town like he owned everything. He never looked at poor people unless he was telling them to get out of his way. Mr. Blackwood is sick, she said quietly. His heart. His heart? Curtis laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. It was mean and sharp. There's nothing wrong with Ezra's heart except he's getting soft. The other 2 men nodded like puppets. One was tall and skinny with a pointy nose. The other was short and round with tiny eyes. They both worked for Curtis and did whatever he told them to do. Miss Caldwell is right, Ezra said. His voice was tired, but he tried to sound strong. Something's wrong with me. I need to rest. Rest? Curtis's face got even redder. You can rest when you're dead. Right now, you need to think about business. Martha felt angry heat rise in her chest. How dare he talk about death like it was a joke? She had seen people die from heart problems. It wasn't funny at all. "Sir, please lower your voice," she said. Loud noises and stress make his condition worse. Curtis turned to look at her like she was a fly that had just landed in his soup. "Who do you think you are, girl? Some kind of doctor?" "I'm someone who knows how to listen to a heartbeat," Martha said. Her voice was still quiet, but now it had steel in it. "And I know what I heard." "You heard nothing." Curtis took a big step toward her. "You're just a nobody trying to feel important." Ezra started to stand up, but Martha put her hand on his shoulder. "Please don't," she whispered. "Getting upset will make it worse." But it was too late. Curtis was already moving closer to Martha, his face twisted with anger. "Listen here, little girl. You don't know anything about anything. Ezra Blackwood is the strongest man in Arizona Territory. He doesn't need some backwoods nobody telling him what to do." "I'm not telling him what to do," Martha said. She backed up until she hit the wall, but she didn't look away from Curtis. "I'm telling him what his body is saying. His body is saying, get back to work." Curtis pointed his finger at Martha's face. "You're nothing but trouble. Probably just want money, like all the rest of them." Martha felt like he had slapped her. Money? She had never asked for money from anyone. She just wanted to help people get better. "That's not true," she said. Her voice was shaking now, but not from fear. It was shaking from anger. "I don't want anything from Mr. Blackwood except for him to stay alive." "Stay alive?" Curtis laughed again, meaner than before. "From what? A little tiredness? You're making him scared over nothing." The tall, skinny man spoke up for the first time. "Maybe she's working with Morrison, trying to ruin the deal so he can get the land cheaper." Martha's mouth fell open. How could they think such terrible things about her? She barely knew who Morrison was, let alone care about some land deal. "That's ridiculous," she said. "I've never even met Mr. Morrison." "Sure you haven't," the short, round man said with a nasty smile. "Just a funny thing that Ezra gets sick right before the biggest deal of his life." Martha looked at Ezra for help, but his face had gone pale. She could see him starting to believe what the men were saying. The doubt in his eyes hurt worse than all of Curtis's mean words. "Mr. Blackwood," she said softly, "you know that's not true. You felt the pain in your chest before you even knew who I was." But Curtis wasn't done yet. He moved even closer to Martha. So close, she could smell the whiskey on his breath. "How much is Morrison paying you, girl? How much does it cost to buy a liar?" "I'm not lying!" Martha's voice finally got loud. She had never yelled at an adult before, but she couldn't help it. "I'm trying to save his life." "Save his life?" Curtis threw back his head and laughed, like it was the funniest thing he had ever heard. "You? A little nobody who sweeps floors and empties bedpans? What could you possibly know about saving anyone?" Each word hit Martha like a rock. She knew she wasn't important. She knew she was just a poor girl who worked for the doctor. But she also knew she was right about Ezra's heart. And these men were going to get him killed. "I know more than you do," she said. Her voice was quiet again, but it was strong. "I know what it sounds like when someone's heart is trying to stop." Curtis's face turned purple with rage. "You little..." "Ben, that's enough." Ezra's voice was sharp, but Martha could hear how hard it was for him to speak. "Don't talk to her like that." "Oh, so now you're protecting her?" Curtis spun around to face Ezra. "She's got you wrapped around her little finger, doesn't she? Poor little sick Ezra needs a girl to take care of him." Martha saw Ezra's hands clench into fists. The anger was making his face red, and she could see the pulse jumping in his neck. This was exactly what his heart didn't need. "Stop it," she said, stepping between Curtis and Ezra. "You're making everything worse." "I'm making it worse?" Curtis pushed past Martha like she wasn't even there. "Ezra, look at yourself. Sitting in a chair, letting some girl tell you what to do. Your father would be ashamed." Martha saw the words hit Ezra like a punch. His whole body went stiff, and his breathing got fast and shallow. She knew Curtis had said the one thing that would hurt Ezra most. "Leave my father out of this," Ezra said. His voice was dangerous now, but Martha could hear the pain underneath it. "Your father built an empire with his bare hands," Curtis said. "He never let anyone tell him he was too weak to work. He never hid in some doctor's office because a little girl scared him. His father also died of a heart attack when he was 50, Martha said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her. "I heard Doc Henderson talking about it. He said it ran in the Blackwood family." The room went completely quiet. Martha could hear her own heart beating in her ears. She hadn't meant to say that. It had just come out. Curtis stared at her with his mouth open. The other two men looked confused. But Ezra's face had gone white as paper. "How did you know that?" he whispered. Martha felt sick. She had just told Ezra something terrible about his own family, something he maybe didn't even know. But it was too late to take it back now. "Doc Henderson keeps records of everyone who dies in the territory," she said quietly. "Your father's name was in the book. It said he died of heart failure at age 52. Curtis found his voice first. "That doesn't prove anything. Ezra's only 35. He's got years before he needs to worry about that." But Martha shook her head. Heart problems can start early, especially if they run in families. The stress of running a big business, never resting, always pushing yourself. She looked at Ezra with sad eyes. "It's exactly what killed your father." Ezra put his hand over his heart, like he could feel it breaking. "My father never told me he was sick. He just, one day, he was gone. Because he was too proud to admit weakness," Curtis said, but his voice wasn't as mean now. "Just like you should be." Martha couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Pride? You think pride is more important than staying alive?" "I think a man has responsibilities," Curtis shot back. "I think some things are more important than hiding in bed like a scared child." "Like what?" Martha asked. "What's more important than living?" "Duty, honor, keeping your word." Curtis counted on his fingers. "All the things your generation doesn't understand." Martha felt the anger rise in her again. "I understand plenty. I understand that dead men can't keep their word to anyone." The two men stared at each other across the room. Curtis, with his red face and mean eyes, Martha, with her quiet strength and careful words. Between them sat Ezra, looking more lost and scared than any rich, powerful man should ever look. "The meeting is in 45 minutes, Curtis said finally. "Are you coming or not?" Ezra looked at Martha. Then he looked at Curtis. Then he looked down at his own hands, still shaking just a little bit. Martha held her breath. Everything she had said, everything she had risked, came down to this moment. Would Ezra choose his business or his life? Ezra's hands gripped the arms of the chair so tight his knuckles turned white. Martha watched his face change as he fought with himself inside his head. She could almost see the battle happening. His father's memory pulling one way, Curtis's anger pulling another way, and his own scared heart pulling a third way. 45 minutes, Ezra said slowly, like he was talking to himself, to make the biggest deal of my life. "That's right," Curtis said. His voice was softer now, like he was talking to a child. "Think about all the work we've put into this, Ezra. 2 years of planning. 2 years of convincing Morrison to sell. If we don't close this deal today, someone else will buy that land tomorrow." Martha wanted to scream. Couldn't Curtis see that Ezra was sick? Couldn't he see the pale skin and shaky hands and tired eyes? Or maybe he could see it, but he just didn't care. "Mr. Blackwood," she said quietly, "what good is land if you're not alive to use it?" "Don't listen to her," the skinny man said. He had been quiet for a while, but now he stepped forward. "She doesn't understand business. She doesn't understand how much money we're talking about." "How much money?" Martha asked. She wasn't really curious about the answer. She just wanted to keep them talking so Ezra could rest a little longer. $50,000, the round man said proudly. "Biggest ranch deal in Arizona Territory history." Martha's mouth fell open. $50,000 was more money than everyone in Copper Creek would see in their whole lives put together. No wonder these men were so upset about missing the meeting. But then, she looked at Ezra's face and saw something that scared her. He was starting to think the money was more important than his health. She could see it in his eyes. "That's a lot of money," she said carefully. "But money can't buy you a new heart." "Money can buy the best doctors," Curtis said quickly. "If Ezra's really sick, and I'm not saying he is, we can hire doctors from San Francisco, from New York City even. Real doctors, not some frontier girl who thinks she knows everything." Martha felt like he had punched her in the stomach. She wasn't a real doctor, she knew that. She was just a girl who helped Doc Henderson and tried to pay attention to what she saw. "You're right," she said, and her voice came out smaller than she wanted it to. "I'm not a real doctor." She saw hope light up in Curtis's eyes. He thought he was winning. "But," Martha continued, making her voice stronger, "I've been helping Doc Henderson for 3 years. I've seen 20 people die from heart problems, and every single one of them had the same signs Mr. Blackwood has right now." "Signs can be wrong," the skinny man said. "People get tired all the time. Doesn't mean they're dying." Martha nodded. "You're right again. Signs can be wrong." She walked over to the shelf where Doc Henderson kept his medical books. She pulled down a thick book with a cracked leather cover. "But this book isn't wrong," she said, opening it to a page she had read many times. "It says that irregular heartbeat, chest pain, shortness of breath, and hand tremors are all signs of serious heart disease. It says that stress and overwork can trigger a fatal episode at any time." She held the book out so everyone could see the page. The words were big and clear, written by real doctors who had studied hearts for years and years. Curtis looked at the book like it might bite him. "Books don't know everything," he said, but his voice wasn't as sure as before. "This book was written by Dr. William Harvey," Martha said. "He's the most famous heart doctor in America. He studied at Harvard University." She could see uncertainty creeping into Curtis's face. He didn't like being wrong about anything, especially not by a girl with a book. "Even if you're right," he said slowly, "one day of rest won't cure heart disease. If Ezra's really sick, he'll still be sick tomorrow. But if we miss this meeting, Morrison will be gone forever." Martha felt her heart sink. Curtis was right about one thing. She couldn't cure Ezra's heart disease in one day, but she could keep him from making it worse. "One day might not cure him," she said, "but one day of stress and excitement might kill him." She turned to Ezra, who had been listening to everything without saying a word. "Mr. Blackwood, do you remember what you were doing when the chest pain started?" Ezra thought for a moment. "I was in a business meeting, arguing with someone about cattle prices. I got angry, and—" He paused, his hand moving to his chest. "That's when it first hurt. And yesterday, when it got worse? I was reading telegrams about the Morrison deal. There was a problem with the lawyers, and I was worried we might lose everything." His voice got quieter. "I couldn't catch my breath for almost 10 minutes. Martha nodded sadly. "Every time you get stressed or excited, your heart gets worse. That meeting today will be the most stressful thing you've done all week." Curtis threw up his hands. "So what are you saying? That Ezra should never work again? That he should just give up everything he's built because he might get a little tired?" "I'm saying he should listen to his body," Martha replied. "I'm saying that being alive is more important than being rich." "Easy for you to say," the round man spoke up. "You don't have anything to lose." Martha looked around the little clinic, at the simple wooden shelves, the few bottles of medicine, the worn chair where she spent her days helping sick people. He was right. She didn't have much to lose. But she had something to gain. If she could save Ezra's life, if she could prove that quiet people like her could make a difference, maybe she would finally matter to someone. "You're right," she said. "I don't have much, but that means I can see clearly. I'm not blinded by money or deals or what other people think. I just see a man who needs help." Ezra stood up suddenly, and everyone turned to look at him. Martha held her breath, waiting to see what he would choose. "The meeting," he said slowly. "If I go to the meeting and something happens to me there—" "Nothing will happen," Curtis said quickly. "You're strong, Ezra. Stronger than you know. But if something does happen, Ezra continued, in front of Morrison and all those other businessmen, it won't just be my life that's ruined. It will be yours too. And everyone who works for us. Curtis's face went white. He hadn't thought about that. If Ezra collapsed during the meeting, if he died right there in front of everyone, the scandal would destroy the Blackwood empire forever. That won't happen, Curtis said. But now he sounded scared instead of angry. How do you know? Martha asked gently. How can you promise something like that? Curtis opened his mouth, then closed it again. He couldn't promise anything, and they all knew it. The room got quiet again. Outside, Martha could hear the sound of horses and wagons moving through the street. Normal people doing normal things, not knowing that right here in this little clinic, a man was choosing between life and death. If I don't go, Ezra said finally, Morrison will think I'm weak. He might change his mind about selling. If you don't go, Martha said, you'll live to make another deal with someone else. There might not be another deal like this one. There might not be another you. They stared at each other across the small room. Martha could see the fear in Ezra's eyes, but also something else. Something that looked almost like relief. Maybe he was tired of being strong all the time. Maybe he was tired of never being allowed to admit when something was wrong. Maybe he wanted someone to tell him it was okay to rest, just this once. The meeting starts in 30 minutes, Curtis said. His voice was desperate now. Ezra, please, think about your legacy. Think about what your father would want. My father died at 52, Ezra said quietly. Maybe he would want me to live longer than he did. Martha felt hope bloom in her chest, like a flower opening in the sun. Maybe, just maybe, she had gotten through to him. But then Curtis played his last card. If you don't show up, he said, I'll tell everyone in the territory that Ezra Blackwood is too sick to run his own business. I'll tell them you're weak and scared and hiding behind a girl's skirts. Your reputation will be destroyed. The words hit Ezra like a slap. Martha saw him flinch, saw the doubt creep back into his face. She realized that Curtis was threatening the one thing that mattered to Ezra almost as much as his life, his pride. Mr. Curtis, she said, her voice shaking with anger, are you really willing to let him die just to protect your business deal? Curtis met her eyes without flinching. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to protect everything we've built. Martha felt cold all over. She finally understood what she was up against. Curtis didn't just want Ezra to go to the meeting. He needed Ezra to go, no matter what it cost. And Ezra was going to have to choose between his life and his reputation, knowing that either choice might destroy him. Martha's hands shook as she watched 3 horses gallop toward the clinic at full speed. The riders weren't Ezra's business partners this time. These men wore badges that caught the morning sunlight like tiny mirrors. Miss Caldwell. Sheriff Morgan burst through the door without knocking. We need to talk to Mr. Blackwood right now. Ezra looked up from the bed where he'd been resting, his face still pale but much better than yesterday. What's this about, Sheriff? Benjamin Curtis filed charges against you both. Says this young lady here used some kind of frontier magic to bewitch you out of your right mind. The sheriff's weathered face showed he didn't believe the story, but his duty was clear. Martha felt her stomach drop like a stone down a well. She'd saved a man's life, and now she might go to jail for it. That's ridiculous, Ezra said, trying to sit up straighter. Miss Caldwell diagnosed a serious heart condition that could have killed me. Curtis claims different. Says she's a fraud who tricked you into missing the biggest business deal in Arizona territory. He's got witnesses saying you were perfectly fine before you walked into this clinic. The second lawman stepped forward, his hand resting on his gun belt. Ma'am, you'll need to come with us. Judge wants to hear your side of things. She's not going anywhere. Doc Henderson declared, entering the clinic with his medical bag clutched tight in his fist. I've examined Mr. Blackwood myself. The girl's diagnosis was completely correct. With respect, Doc, Curtis has 3 businessmen who say otherwise. They claim Mr. Blackwood was acting normal until he met with this girl alone. Martha's cheeks burned with embarrassment and fear. She could already imagine what people would say, that she'd somehow tricked the rich rancher, that she'd pretended to know about medicine to get attention. "Sheriff." Ezra's voice carried the authority of a man used to being obeyed. "I'm willing to submit to examination by any doctor Curtis chooses. But first, let me show you something." He reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a small glass bottle filled with tiny white pills. "Do you know what these are?" The sheriff shook his head. "Heart medicine. I've been taking them for 2 years. Ever since a doctor in San Francisco told me I had a weak heart. I came to Arizona hoping the dry air would help, but the symptoms got worse." Martha stared at him in shock. He'd never mentioned this before. "I was too proud to admit I was sick, too worried about what my business partners would think. When Miss Caldwell noticed my symptoms, she was the first person brave enough to tell me the truth I'd been hiding from everyone else." The sheriff's expression changed from suspicion to confusion. "So you're saying she was right?" "I'm saying she saved my life by having the courage to speak up when trained businessmen chose to ignore obvious warning signs." Curtis suddenly appeared in the doorway, his face red with anger. "Don't listen to him. He's been bewitched. Yesterday he was ready to close the Morrison deal, and now he's acting like some lovesick fool." "The Morrison deal can wait," Ezra said calmly. "Dead men don't sign contracts." "You're not dying. This is all in your head." Doc Henderson stepped between them. "Mr. Curtis, I've been practicing medicine for 30 years. Mr. Blackwood's heart condition is real and serious. Without proper treatment, he could suffer a fatal attack at any time." "Prove it," Curtis snapped. "Very well." Doc Henderson turned to Martha. "Miss Caldwell, would you demonstrate your diagnostic technique for our visitors?" Martha's heart pounded as all eyes turned to her. This was her chance to prove she wasn't a fraud. But what if she made a mistake in front of everyone? I just listen to the heart and pay attention to what the body is telling me," she said quietly. "Show them," Ezra encouraged. With trembling hands, Martha picked up the stethoscope. She placed it on Ezra's chest and closed her eyes, listening carefully to the rhythm of his heart. "The heartbeat skips every few beats," she explained to the room. "It's like a drum with a broken stick. Sometimes it hits hard, sometimes it barely taps. When people get excited or upset, it gets worse." She looked up at Curtis. "That's why business meetings are dangerous for him right now. The stress makes his heart work too hard." The sheriff leaned forward. "Can you hear that in my heart?" "May I?" Martha asked. When the sheriff nodded, she listened to his chest for a moment. "Your heart beats steady and strong. No skipping, no irregular sounds. It's healthy." "What about mine?" Doc Henderson offered. Martha listened again. "Yours is a little slower, but that's normal for your age. It's still regular and strong." Curtis crossed his arms. "Anyone can pretend to hear things through that contraption." "Then you try it," Ezra challenged. Curtis grabbed the stethoscope and pressed it to Ezra's chest. After a moment, his confident expression faltered. "I don't hear anything special," he admitted. "Because you don't know what to listen for," Martha said gently. "It takes practice to understand what different heart sounds mean." The sheriff scratched his chin thoughtfully. "So you're saying this young lady has special training?" 3 years of working alongside me," Doc Henderson confirmed. "She's learned to recognize symptoms that most people would miss." Curtis wasn't giving up. Even if his heart is sick, that doesn't excuse ruining a business deal worth thousands of dollars. "Actually, it does," said a new voice from the doorway. Everyone turned to see a well-dressed man in an expensive suit and polished boots. He removed his hat to reveal silver hair and kind eyes. "Mr. Morrison!" Curtis exclaimed. "What are you doing here?" "I heard about Mr. Blackwood's health scare and came to see how he was doing." Morrison stepped into the crowded clinic. "I'm glad I did, because it sounds like I need to set the record straight." He looked directly at Curtis. "The land deal isn't ruined, Mr. Curtis. I simply postponed it until Mr. Blackwood recovers. Any businessman who would force a man to negotiate while suffering from a serious illness isn't someone I want to do business with anyway. Curtis's face went white. But the timing. The land will still be there next month. Mr. Blackwood's life might not be. Morrison turned to Martha with a respectful nod. Miss, I understand you're the one who recognized his condition? Martha nodded, still hardly believing that the famous rancher was speaking to her directly. Then you have my gratitude. In my experience, the people who notice details others miss are often the most valuable people to know. The sheriff cleared his throat. Well, seems like there's no crime here after all. Mr. Curtis, you might want to think twice before filing false charges in the future. Curtis stormed out without another word, leaving the clinic feeling much more peaceful. Morrison chuckled. That man always was too focused on money and not enough on people. Mr. Blackwood, when you're feeling better, I'd like to discuss not just buying land, but perhaps partnering on some projects. I could use someone with your business sense and, he glanced at Martha, your good judgment about people. As the visitors filed out, leaving only Martha, Ezra, and Doc Henderson in the clinic, Martha finally allowed herself to breathe normally again. I can't believe Curtis tried to have me arrested, she said. Some people can't admit when they're wrong, Ezra replied. But you handled yourself perfectly. You stayed calm, you explained clearly, and you proved your point without getting angry. That's the mark of a true professional, Doc Henderson added proudly. Martha looked out the window at the dusty street where people were going about their normal business, unaware of the drama that had just played out in the clinic. Do you think people will believe I'm a fraud? She asked. I think people will believe what they see, Ezra said. And what they'll see is a young woman who had the knowledge and courage to save a man's life. The sound of hammering echoed across Copper Creek as workers built a new addition to Doc Henderson's clinic. Martha watched from the porch, a letter from the Denver Medical College clutched in her hands. Hard to believe it's been 2 months since all that excitement, Ezra said, settling into the chair beside her. His color was much better now, and his hands were steady as he sipped his morning coffee. Seems like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once, Martha replied. The hammering stopped, and Tom Wilson, the head carpenter, approached the porch. Miss Caldwell, we're ready to put up the sign for your new office. Where would you like it? Martha smiled. After word spread about how she'd diagnosed Ezra's heart condition, people started coming from neighboring towns, asking for her help. Doc Henderson had suggested she needed her own space to see patients. Right next to Doc Henderson's sign would be perfect, she said. As Tom went back to work, Ezra pulled out a telegram. I got word from Denver yesterday. The medical college is excited to have you start classes next month. Martha's stomach fluttered with excitement and nervousness. I still can't believe they accepted me. I can. You have a gift for understanding what's wrong with people and the courage to speak up about it. That's exactly what good doctors need. A small crowd had gathered to watch the workers hang Martha's new sign. Martha Caldwell, Diagnostic Services. Mrs. Patterson, who used to barely notice Martha's existence, beamed with pride, as if she'd discovered Martha personally. Look at that, she told her friend Mrs. Chen. Our own Martha, going to be a real doctor someday. Martha felt her cheeks warm. She'd never been our Martha to anyone before. Nervous about leaving? Ezra asked quietly. A little. Copper Creek has become home in a way I never expected. She paused, then added even more quietly, and there are people here I'll miss. Ezra reached over and gently took her hand. The people who matter will still be here when you get back. Promise? I promise. Besides, someone needs to keep an eye on my heart while you're gone. Doc Henderson's already agreed to send you regular reports on my condition. Martha laughed. You make it sound like you're going to be my first long-distance patient. Maybe I am. A young boy came running up the street, his face flushed with excitement and worry. Miss Martha! Miss Martha! My pa sent me to get you! Ma's having trouble breathing again! Martha was on her feet immediately, already reaching for her medical bag. This was Billy Santos, whose mother had been suffering from lung problems for weeks. Tell me exactly what's happening, Billy, she said as they hurried down the street. She was hanging laundry, and all of a sudden she couldn't catch her breath. Pa's real scared. They reached the Santos house to find Mrs. Santos sitting in a chair, her breathing shallow and rapid. Her husband paced nearby, wringing his hand. "Thank goodness you're here," Mr. Santos said. "She was fine an hour ago." And then Martha knelt beside Mrs. Santos and took her pulse. Fast and weak. She listened to the woman's chest with her stethoscope, frowning at what she heard. "Mrs. Santos, have you been coughing up anything unusual? Any blood?" The woman nodded weakly. "Just a little, this morning." Martha's mind raced through everything Doc Henderson had taught her. The symptoms pointed to something serious, possibly consumption, or maybe something wrong with her heart or lungs. "Mr. Santos, I need you to send Billy for Doc Henderson right away. Tell him it's urgent." As Billy ran off again, Martha stayed with Mrs. Santos, monitoring her breathing and trying to keep her calm. She'd seen cases like this before, but never had to handle one completely on her own. "Am I dying?" Mrs. Santos whispered. "Not on my watch," Martha said firmly, though her own heart was racing. "We're going to figure out what's wrong and fix it." Doc Henderson arrived within minutes, slightly out of breath from hurrying. He took one look at Mrs. Santos and nodded approvingly at Martha. "Good call getting me quickly. What are your observations?" "Rapid, shallow breathing. Weak pulse. Slight blood in her cough this morning. Started suddenly while she was doing normal activities." Doc Henderson conducted his own examination, then pulled Martha aside. "I believe she's developed a blood clot in her lung. It's serious, but treatable if we act quickly." Martha felt a surge of pride that her instincts had been correct, followed immediately by concern for her patient. They worked together for the next hour, administering medication and monitoring Mrs. Santos's condition. Gradually, her breathing improved and her color returned to normal. "You saved my life," Mrs. Santos told Martha, as they prepared to leave. "We both did," Martha corrected, glancing at Doc Henderson. "I just noticed the symptoms early." As they walked back toward the clinic, Doc Henderson chuckled. "You just noticed the symptoms early? Martha, you probably saved that woman's life by recognizing how serious her condition was. I was scared I might be wrong. Being scared keeps you careful. Being careful keeps your patients safe. Never lose that healthy fear. It's what separates good diagnosticians from reckless ones." Back at the clinic, Ezra was waiting with a concerned expression. "Everything all right? I saw you running. Mrs. Santos had a serious episode, but she's going to be fine," Martha explained. "Thanks to Martha's quick thinking," Doc Henderson added. Ezra smiled. "Seems like Copper Creek is going to miss its best diagnostician. Only for 2 years," Martha said. "Then I'll be back with proper training to go along with whatever natural ability I might have." "The town will be here waiting," Ezra assured her. As the sun set over the Arizona desert, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Martha realized how much her life had changed. 2 months ago, she'd been the invisible girl who swept floors and organized supplies. Now she was someone people sought out for help, someone whose opinion mattered, someone with a future full of possibilities. "Ezra?" she said, as they watched the sunset together. "Yes?" "Thank you for listening to me that first day, for trusting me when you had every reason not to. Thank you for being brave enough to speak up, for seeing what everyone else missed." Martha thought about all the times she'd stayed quiet, all the observations she'd kept to herself, because she didn't think anyone would listen. That day with Ezra had taught her that sometimes the most important thing you can do is find the courage to use your voice. "I'm going to miss this place," she said. "And this place is going to miss you. But Martha, yes, something tells me your real adventures are just beginning." As the stars appeared in the darkening sky above Copper Creek, Martha Caldwell, soon to be student, someday to be doctor, always to be the quiet girl who learned to speak up when it mattered most, smiled and knew he was absolutely right. The desert wind carried the promise of change, of growth, of a future where her voice would help save many more lives. And in 2 years, She would return to this dusty little town not as the invisible girl who swept floors, but as Dr. St. Martha Caldwell, healer, diagnostician, and proof that sometimes the quietest people have the most important things to say.